The throbbing in my right index finger is a sharp, rhythmic reminder of who my son has become. It has been 3 days since the bone snapped, a sound like a dry twig stepping into a winter fire, but the pain is nothing compared to the clarity that followed it. My name is Eleanor. I am 70 years old, and until 72 hours ago, my son Ethan believed I was nothing more than a helpless, withering obstacle, a piggy bank wrapped in wrinkled skin and gray wool. He thought that when he twisted my hand back in a fit of rage, shattering my finger because I refused to sign my life away, he had finally broken me. He thought the tears streaming down my face were born of fear and frailty. He was wrong. Those tears were mourning the death of the boy I once held. The woman staring back at him through them was already calculating the exact geometry of his destruction. To understand the magnitude of his mistake, you must understand the art of my existence. For 5 years, since my husband William passed, I have perfected the role of the poor, fragile widow. It is a costume I wear with the dedication of a method actor. My wardrobe is a spectrum of invisibility, drab browns, washed-out grays, cardigans that smell faintly of mothballs. I walk with a cane I do not need, letting my feet shuffle just a beat too slow. When I speak to my neighbors, I let my voice quaver, pitching it high and thin, like a reed in the wind. They whisper as I pass. Poor Eleanor, so alone, living on pennies. They pity the meager Social Security check they think I survive on. They look at my modest 2-bedroom bungalow and my rusted 2010 sedan and see a woman in decline. They do not see the steel spine beneath the wool. This vulnerability is not a condition. It is a fortress. My husband, a brilliant man who understood the corrosive nature of envy, taught me that the safest place to hide a fortune is behind a facade of mediocrity. When people underestimate you, they stop guarding their tongues. They stop hiding their true intentions. And that is how I learned that my son Ethan, 35 years old and drowning in unearned ambition, and his wife Jessica, a woman whose smile never quite reaches her shark-like eyes, view me not as a mother, but as a harvest. For the last 3 years, I have watched them with the patience of a sniper. Their visits are performances of their own, though far less convincing than mine. They arrive with cheap grocery store cupcakes and eyes that scan my living room for anything of value. Jessica will sit on my worn velvet sofa, kept specifically for this charade, and stroke my hand with skin-crawling condescension. "Oh, Mom," she will coo, her voice dripping with artificial sweetener. "Are you sure you're managing okay? Financially? You know we worry." She doesn't worry about my hunger. She worries about the size of the inheritance. I play my part perfectly. I sigh. I complain about the rising cost of heating oil. I leave overdue notices for minor bills on the counter where I know they will snoop. I feed their greed with crumbs of my supposed poverty, watching them lick their lips. The climax of this long, silent play arrived last Tuesday. It is a day I will never forget, not for the joy of family, but for the brutality of the betrayal. They swept into my house with a manic energy, a folder tucked under Ethan's arm like a sacred text. "Mom, sit down. We have incredible news," Jessica announced, her eyes gleaming with a feverish intensity. They spread photographs across my coffee table, glossy images of a sprawling mansion in a gated community, 5 bedrooms, a pool, a 3-car garage. It was a palace of excess, completely unsuited for 2 people with mediocre jobs and mountains of credit card debt. "It's a steal, Mom," Ethan pressed, his knee bouncing with nervous energy. "Normally $300,000, but we can get it for $200,000 because of a seller dispute. It's the chance of a lifetime." Then came the hook, baited with poison. Jessica leaned in, her perfume cloying and thick in the small room. "And look, Eleanor, the downstairs suite. It's perfect for you. We want you to live with us. No more being alone in this drafty old house. We'll take care of you." The way she said, "take care of you," sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with the cold. It sounded like a prison sentence. They didn't want a roommate, they wanted a hostage. They laid out the terms. They needed a co-signer, someone with established credit to anchor the loan. "If I sign," I asked, infusing my voice with the tremor of a confused old woman, "what happens if you can't pay?" "That won't happen," Ethan snapped, too quickly. "But if it did," I pressed, widening my eyes innocently. Then you'd be responsible, he admitted, waving a hand dismissively. But Mom, we've calculated everything, and if the worst happens, you'll be with us. We'd look after you. I saw the glance they exchanged then, a micro-expression of conspiracy. They knew they couldn't afford the payments. The plan was transparent. Leverage my credit, default on the loan, lose my house to cover their debt, and trap me in their basement suite as a dependent, stripping me of my autonomy and my assets. When I initially refused, muttering about it being too much risk for an old woman, the air in the room shifted instantly. The veneer of the loving son evaporated. Ethan stood up, his face flushing a dangerous shade of red. He began to pace, his breathing heavy. "You're being selfish, Mom," he shouted, his voice cracking. "We are offering you a life, a family, and you're worried about paperwork?" He grabbed my hand, the hand that had held him when he had fevers as a child, the hand that had paid for his college tuition he never finished. He squeezed. He wanted to intimidate me, to squeeze the yes out of me through fear. "Sign the papers, Mom. Don't be stupid." I tried to pull away. "Ethan, you're hurting me." He didn't let go. He twisted. Snap. The sound was sickeningly loud in the quiet living room. A bolt of white-hot lightning shot up my arm. I gasped, clutching my chest, tears instantly blinding me. Ethan recoiled, realizing what he had done. But there was no immediate apology in his eyes, only panic that he might have ruined the deal. Jessica looked at him, not with horror, but with annoyance, as if he had broken a tool they needed to use. I didn't mean to," he stammered, backing away. You make everything so difficult." I cradled my hand, sobbing. But inside, beneath the searing pain, the ice was forming. The last ember of maternal hope was extinguished in that moment. I looked at my son, this stranger, who would break my body to fund his lifestyle, and I made a decision. I wouldn't call the police. Not yet. That would be too easy. A restraining order is a piece of paper. I wanted total, comprehensive devastation. "I need time," I wept, masking my fury with hysteria. "Please, just go. I need to think." They left, confident that the pain would break my will, convinced that I was a frightened old woman who would do anything to placate her violent son. They had no idea that as I sat there, icing my purpled finger, I wasn't thinking about submission. I was thinking about war. Pain has a way of sharpening the senses. As the throbbing in my splinted finger settled into a dull, rhythmic ache, my mind became crystal clear. I sat in my kitchen, a cup of tea untouched before me, and analyzed the situation with the cold detachment of a forensic accountant. This was not merely a son losing his temper. This was a siege. Ethan and Jessica had shown their hand. Violence was now an acceptable tool in their negotiation strategy. If I simply said no again, they wouldn't just leave, they would escalate. To win this war, I had to stop being the victim they saw and become the predator they didn't believe existed. I picked up the phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in months. "Victoria?" I said when the familiar, crisp voice answered. "It's Eleanor. We have a situation. I need you to open a new file. The subject is my son. Victoria is not just my lawyer. She is the daughter I wish I had. 40 years old, sharp as a diamond cutter, and fiercely loyal. She is one of the 3 people on Earth who knows that poor Eleanor is actually a multi-millionaire with a diversified portfolio of real estate and high-yield bonds. When I explained what Ethan had done, the loan, the pressure, the broken finger, the silence on the other end of the line was terrifying. "I'm sending Thomas," was all she said. "Tonight." Thomas is a private investigator who looks like a retired librarian and moves like a ghost. He is the reason my investments are so secure. He finds the rot in a deal before I ever sign a check. Within 48 hours, my team had assembled a dossier that confirmed my darkest suspicions. Thomas sat at my small kitchen table, spreading out photographs and financial records with grim precision. "It's worse than a simple scam, Eleanor," Thomas said, sliding a photo across the laminate tabletop. It showed Ethan and Jessica entering a nondescript office building. "This isn't a real estate agent's office. It's the firm of Miller and Haynes. They specialize in strategic bankruptcy and foreclosure defense." I felt the blood drain from my face. Explain. The house they want? It's a trap. Thomas continued. The price is inflated, but that's not the point. They don't intend to pay the mortgage. The plan is to have you co-sign, making you fully liable. Then, they stop paying after 3 months. When the bank comes to foreclose, they'll claim hardship. Since your name is on the deed, the bank will come for your assets, this house, your pension. They've been asking the lawyer specifically about how to shield their income while sacrificing the co-signer's assets. They want to bankrupt you, Eleanor. They want to strip you of everything, so you have no choice but to move into that basement room. It was a blueprint for slavery. They were engineering my destitution to guarantee my dependence. I looked at the photos of my son laughing as he walked out of that lawyer's office, and I felt something inside me die. The last thread of maternal guilt snapped. Victoria, I said, my voice steady. Prepare the papers. Not for the loan, for the trap. With pleasure, she replied. She handed me a small, silver locket. It looked like a cheap antique store find, the kind an old widow would cherish. Wear this. It's a high-fidelity listening device. It uploads to my cloud server in real time. We need them to confess on tape. We need them to say, explicitly, that they plan to default. On Friday night, they returned. I was ready. I had set the stage with meticulous care. I wore my most faded gray dress, the one with the frayed collar. I didn't style my hair, letting it hang limp and wispy. When I opened the door, I made sure my hand, the one in the splint, trembled visibly. Mom, Jessica cried out, pushing past me with a bottle of cheap wine. We were so worried about you. How is the finger? It hurts, I whispered, looking at the floor. But it gave me time to think. You were right, Ethan. I've been selfish. Ethan's eyes lit up. It was sickening to watch. He didn't see a mother in pain. He saw a vault door creaking open. Does that mean? Come in, I said, shuffling toward the living room. Let's talk. I served them tea with shaking hands, spilling a little into the saucer on purpose. I watched them exchange glances, triumphant, greedy glances. They thought the broken finger had done the trick. They thought they had beaten the dog until it submitted. I want to help you, I said, my voice cracking. I'm an old woman. I don't understand all these big numbers. If I sign, you promise you'll take care of everything? You promise I won't lose my little house? Oh, Mom, of course, Ethan said, leaning forward, his voice oozing with fake sincerity. We've run the numbers 1,000 times. You'll never have to worry about a thing. This is just a formality to get the bank happy. And the room? I asked, touching the locket around my neck. The one in the basement? It's waiting for you, Jessica added, smiling. We're already picking out paint colors. We want you there with us, where you belong. I nodded slowly, letting a tear roll down my cheek. Okay, I'll do it, but I need to read the papers again. My eyes aren't what they used to be. We can help you read them, Ethan offered quickly, reaching for the folder. No, I said, clutching my chest slightly. I need my reading glasses. The strong ones. They're in the bedroom. Excuse me a moment. I rose from the chair with an agonizing slowness, leaning heavily on my cane. I shuffled down the hallway, listening to their hushed whispers of celebration behind me. We got her, I heard Ethan hiss. She's terrified. Just keep being nice, Jessica whispered back. Once she signs, it doesn't matter. I entered my bedroom and gently closed the door. Instantly, my posture straightened. The trembling ceased. I walked silently to my nightstand, picked up my smartphone, and opened the encrypted messaging app I used to communicate with Victoria. I typed 3 words: activate the plan. Then, I picked up a pair of glasses that were exactly the same prescription as the ones I was wearing, hunched my shoulders, and prepared to walk back out into the lion's den. They thought they were waiting for a sheep to return for the slaughter. They had no idea they were sitting in the web of a black widow. Saturday morning arrived with a sky the color of a bruised plum. I spent the hour before their arrival transforming myself. I didn't just get dressed. I armored myself in frailty. I selected a cardigan with a missing button, a subtle detail that screamed, neglect. I didn't brush my hair, letting the gray strands hang limp around my face to frame my features in exhaustion. I practiced my walk in the hallway shuffle, pause, sigh, until I was indistinguishable from the prey they believed me to be. But inside, my heart was beating with the steady, heavy rhythm of a war drum. At 10 a.m. sharp, Ethan and Jessica burst through my front door. They brought with them a gust of cold air and an almost manic euphoria. They carried a bottle of sparkling wine, something cheap and sugary, and a box of pastries. "Best day ever, Mom," Ethan announced, his voice booming in my small entryway. He looked at me, and for a second, I saw him register the dark circles under my eyes and the splint on my finger. But he didn't see pain. He saw compliance. He saw a broken horse ready to be ridden. "We're going to celebrate." Jessica chimed in, her red dress bright and aggressive against the muted tones of my home. "But first, the paperwork. Let's get the boring stuff out of the way so we can toast to our new future." They led me to the dining table like jailers escorting a prisoner. Ethan spread the documents out with the reverence of a priest. He had already marked the signature lines with little sticky notes that said, "Sign here," in cheerful neon arrows. "It's very standard, Mom," he said, clicking a gold pen likely bought on credit just for this occasion and handing it to me. "I've marked everything. You just need to sign your name." I took the pen. My hand trembled, a performance that required significant concentration to keep from gripping the metal barrel until my knuckles turned white. I looked down at the papers. To the untrained eye, they were standard loan documents. To me, they were a confession. I saw the interest rates, the clauses regarding collateral, the aggressive terms that no reputable financial advisor would ever let their client sign. They weren't just buying a house. They were buying a financial time bomb, and they were strapping it to my chest. I lowered the pen to the paper, then stopped. I looked up, catching Jessica tapping her foot impatiently. "Is something wrong, Eleanor?" she asked, her smile tight. I let my voice quaver. "I had a dream last night. About your father." Ethan sighed, a sharp exhalation of annoyance. "Mom, please, not now. He told me to trust family." I lied, looking deep into my son's eyes. "Ethan, look at me." He hesitated, then met my gaze. His eyes were the same shade of brown as mine, but they were clouded with a desperate, hungry film. "Promise me," I whispered. "Promise me that if things get hard, if you can't pay, you'll tell me. You won't let the bank just take my house without warning. You'll protect me." It was the final test, a chance for redemption. If he had hesitated, if he had looked away in shame, perhaps I would have stopped. Perhaps the mother in me would have intervened to save him from himself. But he didn't blink. He smiled, and it was the most terrifying smile I have ever seen on my son's face. "Of course, Mom," he said smoothly. "We would never let anything happen to you. You're safe with us, I swear." "We're doing this for you, Eleanor," Jessica added, placing a hand on my shoulder. Her touch felt like a brand. "So we can all be together." Liars, both of them. The locket around my neck recorded every syllable of their treachery. "Okay," I breathed out. "Okay." I signed. First the loan application, then the co-signer agreement, then the deed of trust. With every scratch of the pen, I felt a strange sensation not of loss, but of locking a door. I wasn't signing away my future. I was signing their warrant. "Done!" Ethan practically shouted as I lifted the pen from the final page. He snatched the papers away as if he feared the ink might vanish. "We did it! We're homeowners!" Jessica popped the cork on the cheap champagne. It flew across the room and hit my wall, leaving a dent. They didn't care. They poured 3 glasses, spilling foam onto my tablecloth. "To the Morrison family," Ethan toasted, raising his glass high. "To new beginnings." I raised my glass with a shaking hand. "To justice," I murmured into the rim. "What was that, Mom?" "To us?" I corrected, taking a small sip. It tasted like vinegar and sugar. They stayed for 20 minutes, drunk on their own victory. They talked over me, ignoring me, as they planned where to put the grand piano they couldn't afford and which wall to knock down in the master bedroom. I was no longer a person in the room. I was a discarded wrapper, useful only for what I had contained. "We have to run, Mom," Ethan said suddenly, checking his watch. "Bank closes at noon on Saturdays. We need to deposit these." "Go," I said softly. "Don't worry about me." They hugged me, stiff, hurried embraces, and then they were gone. The silence they left behind was heavy, but it was peaceful. I walked to the window and watched their car peel away from the curb, Ethan driving too fast, as always. I stood there for a long time, until the car was just a speck, and then nothing. Slowly, deliberately, I walked to the kitchen sink and poured the rest of the champagne down the drain. I washed the glass until it sparkled. Then, I went to the phone. I dialed Victoria. "It's done," I said. My voice was no longer trembling. It was cold, hard, and steady as steel. "They took the bait. They have the papers." "Did they confess?" Victoria asked. "They promised to protect me while planning to bury me," I replied. "I have it all on the recording." "Good," Victoria said. "Then let's initiate phase 2. The bank manager is expecting us on Wednesday. Eleanor, are you okay?" I looked down at my broken finger. The pain was still there, but it felt distant now, like a memory of someone else's life. "I'm fine, Victoria," I said. "I'm just cleaning the house." The days leading up to Wednesday stretched out like a drawn bowstring. While Ethan and Jessica lived in a bubble of premature victory, probably picking out curtains for a house they would never own, I was fortifying the trap. On Monday, Victoria visited my house, not as my lawyer, but disguised as a weary government caseworker in a beige trench coat. To the neighbors, she looked like a bureaucrat checking on a pensioner. Inside my kitchen, however, she was a general reviewing the battle plan. "We have the text messages Thomas intercepted," she said, tapping her tablet. "They're discussing selling your antique furniture once you move into the basement. They estimate they can get $5,000 for your dining set." I felt a cold flash of anger, but I pushed it down. "Let them dream," I said. "The awakening will be rude enough." Wednesday morning arrived with a sterile, white sunlight. Ethan pulled into my driveway at 9:45 a.m. He was alone. When I got into his car, the air smelled of stale coffee and nervous sweat. "Where is Jessica?" I asked, buckling my seatbelt with agonizing slowness. "Doctor's appointment," Ethan said quickly, his eyes fixed on the road. "She couldn't reschedule, but she sends her love." A lie. Jessica was likely too anxious to face the final bureaucratic hurdle, or perhaps she was already packing boxes. As we drove toward the bank, Ethan went into coaching mode. His voice took on that patronizing, slow cadence one uses with a toddler or a senile relative. "Now, Mom," the bank manager, Mr. Sterling, "he's going to ask some standard questions. Just keep it simple. If he asks about your income, just show him your Social Security stub. Don't try to explain your budgeting. I'll handle the talking." "I understand, dear," I said, clutching my purse. Inside that purse was not just my Social Security stub, but the grenade I was about to pull the pin on. We arrived at the bank, a glass and steel monolith that felt entirely too cold. Robert Sterling's office was in the back, a spacious room with mahogany furniture and the hushed atmosphere of serious money. Robert, a college friend of Victoria's and a man of impeccable integrity, stood up as we entered. He was the picture of banking authority: silver hair, tailored suit, unreadable expression. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, shaking my hand with a gravity that Ethan clearly mistook for simple politeness. "Mr. Morrison, please, sit." Ethan sat on the edge of his chair, knee bouncing. "We're in a bit of a rush, Mr. Sterling. We've already signed the papers on Saturday. We just need to finalize the co-signer verification." "Protocol is protocol, I'm afraid," Robert said smoothly. He opened a folder. "As a co-signer for a loan of this magnitude, the bank requires a full asset verification. It's for your mother's protection as much as ours." Ethan scoffed. "My mother lives on a fixed income. She has her house and her pension. That's it. We've already listed everything." Robert ignored him and turned his gaze to me. "Mrs. Morrison, do you have the documentation regarding your current savings?" "Oh, yes," I said, my voice trembling just the right amount. I reached into my bag and pulled out a tattered, blue passbook saving book, a relic from a local credit union I kept with a balance of $400 specifically for appearances. "This is my main account." I handed it to Robert. Ethan rolled his eyes, clearly embarrassed by his mother's antiquated banking methods. Robert opened the book, studied it for a moment, and then turned to his computer. The silence in the room was thick. The only sound was the clicking of Robert's keyboard. "I see," Robert murmured. "And you are sure this is everything, Mrs. Morrison?" "Well," I said, looking down at my hands. I tried to be thrifty. William always said to save for a rainy day." Robert typed a few more keys, then stopped. He looked over the top of his glasses at Ethan. "Mr. Morrison, perhaps you should look at this." He swiveled the large monitor around so it faced us. Ethan leaned forward, squinting. "What is this? I don't understand." "This," Robert said, his voice dropping an octave, "is a consolidated view of your mother's assets linked to her Social Security number." I watched Ethan's face. It was a masterpiece of confusion that slowly dissolved into absolute shock. He read the lines on the screen, his lips moving silently. Account $8,840, $450,000, high-yield savings. Vanguard investment portfolio, $1,200,000. Municipal bond trust, $850,000. Real estate holdings, commercial, $300,000. Total net worth, $2,800,000. Ethan blinked. He rubbed his eyes and looked again. He looked at the screen, then at me, then back at the screen. His mouth opened, but no sound came out, like a fish pulled onto a dock. "Mom?" he squeaked. It was the voice of a confused child. Is this yours?" I looked up, letting the confused old lady mask slip just a fraction. "Oh, those? Yes. Your father was very good with investments, Ethan, and I've been very careful." "Careful?" Ethan stood up, his chair scraping loudly against the floor. "Careful? Mom, you have $3 million. You wear clothes from Goodwill. You complain about the heating bill. You let me pay for lunch at Denny's." "I never asked you to pay, Ethan," I said softly. "You offered, and I accepted." "But why?" He was shouting now, his face flushing deep crimson. "Why hide it? We've been struggling. Jessica and I have debt. We needed help, and you've been sitting on a gold mine acting like a pauper." Robert cleared his throat, a sharp sound that cut through Ethan's hysteria. "Mr. Morrison, please sit down." Ethan collapsed back into the chair, staring at me with a mixture of horror and greed. I could see the gears turning in his head. The shock was fading, replaced by a sudden, sickening realization. The co-signer isn't a burden. She's a jackpot. "Mom," he whispered, his tone shifting instantly from anger to a desperate, fawning awe. "I had no idea. This changes everything." "Does it?" I asked. "I'm still the same mother I was 5 minutes ago." "Mr. Morrison," Robert interrupted, his voice steel hard. "Given this new information that your mother is a high-net-worth individual, the risk profile of this loan changes. The bank needs to know, knowing that she has the means to pay off this loan outright. Do you still wish to proceed with her as a co-signer?" This was the trap, the final moral test. If Ethan had any decency, he would have said, "No, Mom, you have money. You don't need to risk your credit. Let's figure something else out." Or he would have apologized for the deception. But Ethan didn't see a mother. He saw a safety net made of diamonds. "Proceed?" Ethan laughed, a manic, breathless sound. "Of course we proceed. If she has this kind of money, then there's no risk. The bank is guaranteed its money. Hell, she could buy the house 10 times over." He turned to me, his eyes gleaming with a predatory light. "Mom, this is great. You sign the papers, and if we stumble, you just write a check. It's nothing to you. You have millions." I looked at him, feeling a profound, hollow sadness. He had just confirmed, in front of a witness, that he viewed my life savings as his personal insurance policy. "So you want to go ahead?" I asked quietly, "knowing I can pay if you default?" "Absolutely," Ethan said, slamming his hand on the desk. "Where do I sign?" Robert pulled a new stack of documents from his drawer. These weren't standard loan papers. They were sworn affidavits prepared by Victoria. They stated that the borrower, Ethan, was entering the agreement in good faith, with no intent to default, and that he acknowledged full legal liability for any fraud committed. "Since the asset profile has changed," Robert lied smoothly, "I need you to sign these additional disclosures. They confirm you aren't coercing the co-signer and that you intend to make all payments yourself. Fine, whatever, Ethan said, grabbing the pen. He didn't read a single word. He signed page after page, his hand flying, his mind already spending my money. He signed his confession. He signed his intent to defraud. He signed away his freedom. Done, Ethan said, dropping the pen. He looked at me with a wide, shark-like grin. Mom, we are going to have a long talk about your investment strategy when we get home. Jessica is going to flip. Yes, I said, standing up and smoothing my skirt. I imagine she will. I looked at Robert. He gave me a barely perceptible nod. The trap was sprung. The evidence was irrefutable. Ethan had just legally bound himself to a loan he couldn't afford, while explicitly targeting my assets on record. Thank you, Mr. Sterling, I said. The pleasure was mine, Mrs. Morrison, Robert replied, and his eyes said, I'm sorry your son is a monster. We walked out to the car. Ethan was practically skipping. He thought he had just won the lottery. He didn't realize he was walking toward the gallows. The drive back from the bank was suffused with a silence that felt heavy and electric, like the air before a thunderstorm. Ethan was vibrating with energy, tapping his fingers on the steering wheel, humming a tune I hadn't heard in years. He was mentally spending my millions, a new car, a vacation, perhaps paying off his gambling debts. He thought he was driving a senile goose that laid golden eggs. He didn't notice that the frail old woman in the passenger seat was sitting spine straight, her eyes dry and sharp as flint. You know, Ethan said, breaking the silence as we turned onto my street. We should really look into getting power of attorney for you, Mom. Managing all those accounts. It's a lot of work for someone your age. Jessica and I could handle it. I laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. It was a dry, brittle sound. Ethan, I said, and my voice had dropped the trembling vibrato. It was the voice I used to use when I was a younger woman running a household. Do you remember Tuesday, when you broke my finger? Ethan flinched. The car swerved slightly. Mom, I told you. It was an accident. I was stressed. Why bring that up now? We're celebrating. I bring it up. I continued, turning to face him. Because I want to know, did you break it because you were stressed? Or did you break it because you needed me to be afraid enough to sign? He pulled the car over to the curb in front of my house and killed the engine. He turned to me, his expression shifting from euphoria to annoyance. Mom, stop it. You're ruining the mood. We're doing this for you. And the foreclosure? I asked. Are you doing that for me too? His face went slack. What? I know, Ethan, I said, savoring the look of absolute terror dawning in his eyes. I know the house is overpriced. I know about the lawyer you hired to teach you how to default strategically. I know you plan to stop paying the mortgage in 3 months. I know you intended to let the bank take my home so you could force me into your basement. That's crazy, he stammered, but his voice was thin and reedy. Who told you that? I didn't need to be told. I listened. I watched. And I realized that my son isn't just bad with money. He is a predator. I unbuckled my seatbelt. You looked at my broken finger and didn't feel shame. You felt leverage. Mom, wait. He grabbed my arm gentler this time, desperate. We were desperate. The debts. We're drowning, Mom. We didn't want to hurt you. We needed a way out. And now that we know you have money, we don't have to do the foreclosure. We can just pay. Exactly, I said, pulling my arm away. You only love me when I can pay for your mistakes. Goodbye, Ethan. I got out of the car and walked to my front door without a cane, without a shuffle. I walked like a woman who owns the ground she steps on. I didn't look back. For the next 24 hours, I let them sweat. I ignored their calls. I let them stew in the panic that their golden goose had flown the coop. But I wasn't finished. Revenge is a dish best served with a final, crushing garnish. On Tuesday evening, I called Ethan. I made my voice sound weary, resigned. Son, I said. Mom, please let me explain. Shh, I've been thinking. You're right. Family is family. I heard him exhale a sound of pure relief. Yes, exactly. We can work this out. I don't want to co-sign the loan, I said. I've decided. I'm going to pay for the house. In cash. The full $200,000. Silence. Then, an explosion of gratitude. "Oh my God, Mom, you would do that? I want you to have a fresh start," I lied. "Meet me at the bank tomorrow at 11 a.m. Bring Jessica. We'll transfer the funds." Wednesday at 11 a.m. Robert's office was once again the stage. This time, Jessica was there, wearing a bright green dress that clashed with the serious decor. She looked like she had already won the lottery. Ethan looked nervous but hopeful, greed warring with his shame. "Eleanor," Jessica cried, rushing to hug me. "You are a saint." "Truly." "We don't deserve you, Mom," Ethan added, his eyes wet with tears that were 10% regret and 90% relief. "No," I said, stepping back from their embrace. "You don't." I nodded to Robert. "Before we transfer the funds," I said, my voice hardening, "I have one question. Jessica, did you know Ethan broke my finger?" Jessica froze. She looked at Ethan. "He told me you fell." "He snapped it backward because I wouldn't sign," I corrected. "And did you know that the house you're buying isn't worth $200,000? It's legally condemned. The seller is scamming you." Confusion washed over their faces. "What?" Ethan asked. "You tried to trap me," I said, "but you walked into a trap yourself. If I had signed that loan, we would all be bankrupt, but I didn't come here to save you." I turned to the door. "Now." The door opened. It wasn't a teller with a check. It was two uniformed police officers, followed by Victoria, who looked like the angel of retribution in a black power suit. "Ethan Miller, Jessica Miller," the lead officer said, stepping forward. "You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit financial fraud, elder abuse, and extortion." The sound of the handcuffs clicking onto Ethan's wrists was the sweetest music I had ever heard. It was better than any symphony. "Mom!" Ethan screamed as they pulled him up. "Mom! Stop them! You can't do this!" "I can," I said, watching him with dry eyes. And I did. "Eleanor, please!" Jessica shrieked, her mascara running. "We're family." "No," I said softly. "Family protects you. You are just people who share my last name." The aftermath was swift and brutal. Victoria and the prosecution laid out the case with surgical precision. The audio recordings from my locket, the text messages, the sworn affidavits Ethan had signed at the bank declaring his intent, it was an airtight coffin. But the investigation revealed something even darker. I wasn't their only victim. They had borrowed $50,000 from Jessica's mother, a woman with early-onset Alzheimer's. They had scammed an uncle. They were parasites who had been feeding on the elderly for years. Ethan was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Jessica got 4. I didn't attend the sentencing. I was too busy. I used the cash I had promised them and a significant portion of my investment dividends to create a restitution fund. I repaid Jessica's mother every cent she had lost, plus interest for her care. I made whole every person they had cheated. 6 months later, I sat in my new office. It wasn't a corner office in a skyscraper. It was the front room of my bungalow, converted into the headquarters of the Eleanor Foundation for Elder Justice. On the wall, framed in simple black wood, was a letter from the governor thanking me for my work in exposing predatory lending schemes targeting seniors. But more important were the photos on my desk, photos of the people I had helped. My phone rang. It was a woman named Martina. Her voice trembled, high and thin, just like mine used to. "Mrs. Morrison?" she asked. I think my nephew is trying to take my house. I don't know what to do." I leaned back in my chair, looking at my hand. The finger had healed perfectly. It was strong. It was ready to point the way. "Tell me everything, Martina," I said, picking up my pen. "And don't worry, you aren't alone anymore. We're going to teach him a lesson he'll never forget."